Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, still just good morning. Welcome to the second session in our day today, which is going to look at overcoming regulatory constraints to becoming global aviation businesses. We have an esteemed panel to discuss this issue, which I'll be introducing in just 1 minute. This is a really important topic as we move forward in the aviation industry. We're coming from in an industry that is perhaps more regulated than, I don't know, perhaps the nuclear industry or something would only surpass it in terms of the amount of regulation. But it's also not a global business. It's a global business in that we transport passengers around the world. But it's still an industry that's very much based in the legacy of the old national carriers existing in a world of bilateral treaties and bilateral route arrangements. And we're going to look in this panel really at how we begin, if we do, to tackle this challenge over the next 10, 25 years, whether it's even possible to create global aviation businesses, and whether indeed there's any alternative to creating global aviation businesses if we're to have a sustainable industry in the future. So I'm going to introduce our panel up onto stage, as we did in the first session, one by one. So in no particular order, we've got Kevin Knight, who's the Chief Strategy and Planning Officer of Etihad. Secondly, we've got Ghaith Al Ghaith, who's the Chief Executive Officer of flydubai. We have Neil Mills, all the way from India, Chief Executive of Spicejet. A bit closer to home, we have Thierry Antinori, the Executive Vice President Passenger Sales Worldwide for Emirates Airlines. And finally, not from the airline world, but from a very important sector which supports the airlines, MRO, we've got James Stewart, the Group Chief Executive Officer, Mubadala Aerospace MRO Network. Right, okay, excellent. Okay, and from Ethiopian Airlines, are we just waiting for the seat? We've got the seat, excellent. Last minute change to the programme. Thanks very much. Good. Okay, well, as I was saying earlier, please take your seats. We've seen an unprecedented change in the aviation market over the past decade, with a seismic shift from the old order of largely legacy flag carrier airlines operating in a market of bilateral route structures with restricted access to hub airports and limited competition. A number of factors, rising oil prices, surging economic growth in the Middle East, the BRIC countries and elsewhere in Asia, the aftershocks of 9/11 sent these old certainties into a tailspin, and it's really been changing at quite a furious pace over the last decade or so. While many of the old legacy carriers, but by no means all, have struggled to keep up, we've seen the emergence of new aviation players in the Gulf here and elsewhere, in India, in China, in Southeast Asia, Latin America, as well as a raft of low-cost, short-haul carriers who have arrived with new, challenging business models. And that's been the case even in the markets of North America and Europe, with the likes of Ryanair and EasyJet. And you get the feeling here today in 2012 that the plates are shifting again, with another wave of industry bankruptcies in Europe, and many well-known names in crisis in Europe, in North America, and beyond. And many believe that full-blown mergers, not just alliances, are the answer. And we've already seen some bold moves on that front, with the emergence of AIG, the Lufthansa Group, Air France KLM groupings in Europe, Northwest Delta, United Continental in the USA. We've also seen airlines in this part of the world extend their footprint with strategic investments. We've seen legacy airlines wrestle with their cost structures to find a model that allows them to operate in long-haul competition with some of these new blue-chip carriers, but also at the same time operate short-haul feeder networks in competition with some of the new low-cost carriers. And that almost two business model challenge has been a major one for a lot of the legacy airlines. And at the same time, getting back to the specific subject that we're here to address, we've seen a slow and at times painful transition to more open skies. But there are enormous challenges to achieving this, to achieving a truly global open sky, from slot-constrained airports to legacy air traffic control, air traffic management issues, trade union, political opposition to greater competition. Today's consumer has more choice when it comes to flying than he or she had a decade ago, but it's still very, very far from a free market. But the question, I suppose, has to be asked, is all regulation bad? And of course it's not. As I said earlier, this is a very regulated industry for very good reason. As Tony Tyler talked about in his opening remarks, this is an incredibly safe industry. And one of the reasons for that is because it is so heavily regulated. Everything has to be certificated, everything has to be inspected, every incident is investigated and reported on. It's an incredibly regulated industry, and that is a good thing in many ways. But what about the other sides of regulation? Bilateral treaties, slot constraints at airports, the system of air traffic management, not just in Europe, but throughout the world. Are these a good thing for a free global market? And probably not. So, does the need for government oversight stretch the ability to decide whether a new airline can enter a market? And that's a question, really, that we have to address. The other one, of course, is the question of funding. With governments running out of patience or having their hands tied when it comes to supporting ailing flag carriers, and credit sources generally drying up, where do tomorrow's airlines find the finance, both to get started and also, once they are started, to acquire and replenish their fleets? And since the credit crunch, that has become a huge problem in the industry. So our panel are going to be addressing a lot of these subjects, focusing on the regulatory side. But just before that, we're going to have a bit of fun with the interactive technology that you've all been given. And we're going to get a little bit of audience feedback on this. So the first question we're going to ask, well, before we ask the first question, we're just going to ask you if you could possibly answer the following, just to so we get a geographical mix on where the audience is from. So if you could answer on your keypads, A, if you're from or based in Europe or North America, B, the Middle East, C, the rest of the world, just so we can see where the audience is coming from. So if you could vote now, please. And if everyone's voted, we'll have a look at the answers. They were there, they've gone. So there we are, about half the audience from the Middle East, just over a third Europe or North America, and rest of the world with 13%. Okay, so the first question that we're going to ask the audience: why do you think airlines in the Middle East have been so successful in the past decade when many of their competitors in Europe and the US have struggled? Now, there are probably a whole lot of reasons you're going to say for these, but we're going to say, what is the main reason? What's the one reason, above all others, that you would say is behind this? Vote A for route structure. B, newer, more comfortable airplanes. C, better service. D, ticket prices. And E, lower costs. So we'll have about 30 seconds for you to vote on that, and then we'll look at the findings. So it's the one factor above all others. Okay, so if everyone's voted, we'll have a look at the scores on the doors. So that's interesting. So I guess good news for the manufacturers represented here. That's 32% saying newer, more comfortable airplanes. The route structure, obviously with a very important hub model here in the Middle East. That's the second most popular reason. And better service is the third one. So all of these ahead of ticket prices and lower costs. So that's interesting. Second question. Looking now, I guess, at the global market, looking at aviation right across the world, what do you think is the greatest obstacle to the growth of commercial aviation? What's the one thing, above all else, that's holding the industry back? A, lack of finance. B, skill shortage. C, government regulation, one of the things we're going to be talking about today. D, lack of or poor infrastructure, airports and so on, or some other reason. So if you could vote now, we'll give you a few seconds to do that, and then look at the findings. Okay, so the one reason above all else that you think is constraining the growth of commercial aviation, or will or could constrain the growth of commercial aviation. Let's have a look at the findings. So there we go. Government regulation. Government's not helping aviation, but constraining aviation. 35% of you voting for that one. Lack of finance, of course, after the credit crunch. Very, very big challenge for airlines. And interestingly, the lack of or poor infrastructure in third place. Very interesting. Let's just move on to the third and final question now before we hear from our speakers. And it's a very, very straightforward question. Which sector is going to see the most growth over the next few years? Low-cost carriers or full-service carriers? I guess it's some in each sector will do well, but I think looking at the sectors overall, which one promises the most growth? Low-cost or full-service? So if you'd like to finish off voting, and we'll have a look at the findings. So very interesting. Low cost by a margin of about 50%. 61% thinking that low-cost carriers will see the most growth. And that's a very interesting one, because the low-cost model is very, very new to so many parts of the world. It's still fairly new to the established aviation markets in North America and Europe, but very, very new in markets like Southeast Asia, as was mentioned earlier. So you, the audience, think that low-cost carriers will represent the biggest growth in the industry over the next few years. Okay, so we've heard from you, the audience. Now we're going to hear from our distinguished panel, and we're going to ask Kevin to start as the home carrier here. We're going to ask all the audience just to give us a very short address, just to look at some of these issues as they see them, and then there'll be an opportunity for Q&As afterwards. So Kevin, as a home carrier, would you like to kick off, please?
Thank you. You know, the topic of this panel is an interesting one, you know, overcoming regulatory constraints so that we can grow and expand our businesses. It's certainly a pertinent and appropriate topic for us to discuss today. It's unfortunate that we actually have to talk about it. It's unfortunate that too many regulators around the world today don't really understand or don't appreciate the value that this industry brings to their constituents. And as a result of that, what we find today, as you all know, is a situation where we're over-regulated, or we have regulations that are ill-conceived, ill-guided, and put many barriers in our path and prohibit us from actually generating the value to our shareholders, but also to their constituents that are possible out there. And so first and foremost, I think as we talk about this today, we need to talk about, you know, how we can remove those barriers, how we can educate those we interact with, those regulators that we interface with on a regular basis. How can we educate them, help them understand the value that we actually bring, and therefore help them help us, you know, as we remove those barriers. You know, Tony's talked a lot about this, but I mean, the economic value associated with this industry is phenomenal. Oxford Economics recently completed a study that said that this industry, air transport, you know, contributes over $2 trillion in GDP, you know, produces over 50 million jobs globally. You know, we need to help regulators understand that, you know, that value, help them understand that by removing some of these barriers, we can actually help them achieve the objectives that they're actually trying to achieve out there. But the reality is that we are, in fact, constrained. We do have barriers, and we have to operate within those barriers. So I'm looking forward to the discussion that we're going to have today on that subject. You know, one of the strategies that we deploy at Etihad, which is a little different than some of our peers, is we developed key strategic partnerships. As an airline that's just over 8 years old at this point, we have been very active in developing partnerships. Today we have 35 different airline partners that we work with all around the world. And through those partnerships, we're able to offer our customers greater reach, greater destinations, more choices and products that they seek after. And we're deepening those relationships, most evident recently by the equity investment that we've made in Air Berlin. We've taken 29% of that company. With that investment, we've been able to access their German network. We've been able to provide our customers access to over 150 additional destinations, and we've been able to provide our customers, you know, access to their network. It's a deep commercial relationship. It's immunized, coordinate on schedules, pricing, procurement. Virtually every facet of the business is a way to find synergies that will benefit our customers as well as the shareholders of both companies. And then more recently this year, we've also made an equity investment in Air Seychelles to strengthen our position in leisure markets, particularly in the Indian Ocean. Again, a very deep relationship where we work very closely together to align our networks, to price our products, to go to market in sales. And these are the methods, these are the ways that we are going to the market to try to overcome some of the barriers that we face today. So unfortunately, the reality is we do have these barriers. We're going to have to be creative in the way that we go after the market and grow our businesses. But at the end of the day, eliminating these barriers will be the thing that benefits us most. And we should continue to strive that while we work for creative solutions to work around them. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you very much for that, Kevin. Ghaith, from the perspective of a low-cost carrier, we had the answer there that people think that the low-cost carriers are the future, or at least will represent the most growth in the industry. What is your take on this?
Well, first of all, I agree. The regulatory restraints that we have in this part of the world probably not as bad as it used to be, but it's still not good enough. And since we all live in one global village, and the reason for the globalization is the development of transportation and communication. So you would think that any restraint on the growth and on the airlines growing, this will constrain the growth of us as a global.
Can I stop you there, Ghaith? Are we getting Ghaith's microphone okay? Can everyone hear him? It sounds a bit funny from over here. I'm sorry to interrupt, okay?
No, not at all. So I think, first of all, we have to take the issue from that the airline industry is a stimulus for the global growth. So the least constraint, the faster the airline can contribute to this global village we are living in. Of course, we are very fortunate, as I said, in this part of the world. I think a lot of the regional countries, and especially the United Arab Emirates, have learned and adopted open sky policies for a long time, especially here in the UAE. And we are in flydubai as the newcomers in this region. With all of the other constraints, we've been able to take advantage of the open sky policies that is available for the airline to growth. And that can be seen by the other neighboring countries as an example of how open sky have actually helped this part of the world. This part of the world depends on trade, transportations, and tourism. And without open sky, those three T's, if you would like to call them, they will not be able to achieve the maximum return for the country. So it's very good to look at this part of the world as an example for the success of an open sky policy. And I think that we, as an example, in flydubai, with the growth that we have seen in the short period that we have existed, is a good example to also debate.
Okay. Thank you very much. Neil, would you like to comment from your experiences in running an Indian carrier, very different markets? What are some of the challenges there that you have as a low-cost carrier?
For us in India, it's a hugely regulated market.
I think we're just getting a replacement microphone.
In India, which is obviously the most heavily regulated market pretty much in the world, you can spend a lot of time beating yourself up about what you can't do, or you can spend a lot of effort about how you work with the regulation that's there. So despite the regulated environment, Spicejet has managed to grow to carry 12 million people a year now, and we're now the second fastest growing low-cost carrier in the world, despite everything else that's been around us. So we spend our efforts on how do we work with the regulation, where we even have to ask for permission to either increase or decrease frequency on an existing domestic route. So we are in pretty much the most constrained environment available, but you can still make it work. And it's taken a long time for the regulation to get there. It's fairly naive for us to think that over the next year or two it's all going to go away. So we'll just have to work around and be creative, as I think my colleague said earlier, around how we actually get around the regulation that exists, because we can't expect that it's all going to go away. In this part of the world, I know it's been a lot more liberal, but the large populations in Southeast Asia, there's a lot more constraints about the openness within those markets. But I certainly believe going forward as a regional player rather than as a fully global player, we can make the regulations work for us rather than just work against us. They obviously also provide a level of protection so that once you get a certain right between 2 points, it also means that you can't have 4 competitors the following day. And that was certainly a constraint that I saw in Europe, where when we opened up new markets, within a week of announcing the route, we then had 4 competitors, which meant that for the first 12 months, we all just played how low can you go. So there is an upside to regulation as well, which certainly will help the investment that you actually put in actually bear some returns over time.
Okay, thanks very much. Thierry, back to the world of full-service airlines, and one of the best, of course, with Emirates. What's your take on what do you see as the main challenges?
Now, the main challenge will be to continue to seize all the opportunities. And if we come back to the first panel, it's true that the airline industry today, because of the patchy economies in Europe, because of some currency issue, because of the fuel price, is in difficulties. But we know all that recession is not forever, and that there is a life after recession. And it's very important for this industry to keep in line with 7 billion people are living on the planet, and they will have increased mobility needs. 2, in the life and also in an industry, you have always a demand for something with good. So if you offer something good, you will always find customers that will come back to you. So it's very important to deal also now with the future and the growth of this industry, because the demographics are very important. And today we have a situation that is a little dangerous because of oil, because of economies. Some airlines are struggling. Some airlines, even members of Alliance in Europe, are disappearing. One in Spain recently, one in Hungary. And so some other airlines, they are looking for protection by the government, but it's thinking it will help short term. But the question is, how do we manage the long term? Because airlines are also part of the infrastructure for the global economy. And so it's very key, and it's nice to have this platform today. What we think today, if we observe, you have 2 big reactions. The first reaction that some airlines are trying to merge, and you have some example in the industry that show it worked. Some airlines are also tightening the financial link in their alliances, making mega joint venture, sharing seats to protect their bottom line, but it's dangerous for the customer choice. And you have the other way, that's the way of an airline like Emirates, saying we are a global airline, we believe in our brand, and we want to continue to grow organic to establish globally our brand. And the 2 possibilities are there. We firmly believe here in the second possibilities. Why? Because the history of Dubai and UAE showed us it's working. Exactly what Ghaith said before. Here we are experiencing a truly open sky environment with 150 airlines flying to Dubai. And we have the possibility really to every day to benchmark our quality. So if a company is coming in Dubai, we are not complaining. We say, oh, it's a good reason to improve again and again and again. That's why for Emirates, I think, as an example, UAE, Dubai, UAE policy, open sky, truly open sky policy is very key. Secondly, we think that in the future, in any scenario, customer choice and competition will be paramount, because the customer is voting every day with his feet. The technology will enable the customer to know more and more about the product and to take the power through the social networks and so on. So in each situation, the access to markets in this 7 billion global village, access to 6 continents is key. And I firmly believe that it's a key factor for this industry, parallel to the quality and the customer orientation we will offer. There is always possibilities. That's why Emirates already ordered 232 aircraft in addition to the 171 bodies we operate today. But it's sure that for the global efficiency of the economy, it would be very important to have further regulation on the safety issues and technical issues, but really open and truly open sky worldwide for the commercial issue and the customer issues.
Thank you. Thank you very much. We hear a lot about the growth potential of the Middle East, of Latin America, Asia, China. One of the other markets, one of the other regions, of course, that's often seen as a sleeping giant in aviation from a low base, but with huge potential, is the African market. And I'm delighted to welcome Tewolde Gebremariam, from Chief Executive Officer of Ethiopian Airlines, who's going to talk about some of the issues in Africa with regulation for an airline.
Thank you. Well, the African market is also not different from the rest of the world, but it has some peculiarities. And I think for us, one of the most difficult challenges that we are facing today is profitability or rate of return on invested capital. And of course, regulation is also a problem. But when we compare the magnitude of the problem, our internal problem in the industry itself is a major one. On the supply side, of course, we have oil price, especially the last 1 year and 2-3 months. Perhaps oil price going up and staying at high level for a long period of time. This must be the first of its kind for staying for more than a year, and it's becoming a big challenge. Already, even in good time, the industry rate of return is very low, in fact, very dismal, and that's why also it cannot attract capital. Aircraft financing is a big problem, and particularly for carriers in Africa, because the aircraft sector understanding has also compounded the problem, because the export guarantees are being limited now, and our chance and opportunity to access the capital market is also very limited. So on the supply side, we have monopoly situation, monopoly or duopoly suppliers squeezing the airline in between. And on the demand side, on the revenue side, we have huge excess capacity. It's our own making. It's very common now to see airlines flying, 2-3 airlines flying to a destination with half-empty planes and increasing capacity on top of it. So we would say that the most difficult challenge in the airline industry today is within itself. Of course, as I said before, regulation is a problem. It is overly regulated industry, but it also the regulation also lacks coordination. It varies from country to country, from region to region, and it's very difficult to comply for different regulatory frameworks in different regions and countries for a single airline, especially global airline. And it lacks consistency also. But we would say that from our perspective, the most difficult challenges are within the industry, and that is profitability.
Thank you very much. Our last speaker on the panel is the only one who doesn't work for an airline, but he works for a sector of the industry that's also faces its own regulatory challenges, and is also perhaps as James might tell us about, perhaps ripe for consolidation as well. It's James Stewart, who's the Group CEO of the Mubadala Aerospace MRO network, which of course includes ADAT here in Abu Dhabi and also SR Technics in Zurich. James.
Thank you very much, Murdo. Can everyone? It's working. So what I would like to do is, we don't maybe have the same regulatory obstacles in terms of to consolidation. I think in terms of the regulations that we work to are reasonably well aligned between the different certification authorities. So that's not really in terms of the obstacle for us. And in fact, in terms of we actually don't see any choice but to basically lead and be at the vanguard of consolidation in the industry. The MRO industry, just as the airline industry, is economically challenged. I think it's fair to say in terms it's very fragmented and not well positioned in terms of to make the capital investments required for the new products in terms of the airlines need to operate to drive the productivity and efficiency and the costs where they need to be to become profitable. And so for us, in terms of we very much see in terms of consolidation as a necessity. How we do that in terms of, we believe that we need to do that through a series of partnerships. We believe that today in terms of the OEMs participation in the aftermarket will only grow and be more focused. And so we believe it's very important in terms of that we position ourselves with the right strategic partners, both on the OEM side and with our airline partners. We've got to position ourselves not to just provide the traditional MRO services to survive. We've got to be able to provide a suite of aero solutions, which could be, for example, getting into asset management, financing in terms of components, of engines, in terms of, as we said, there's a huge capital requirement to refleet the industry into the new products like the 787, like the 350, like the 320neo, 737 MAX, etc. And so I think that we believe we can play, we need as an industry to play a part and to improve in terms of the level of asset utilization through investing in technology and smart technologies. We see going forward that our role is not just to be the wrench turner, but very much in terms of to be the data optimization in terms of part of the airline, managing not just 100 aircraft, but 1,000 aircraft, 2,000 aircraft, and learning in terms of with the OEMs in terms of how to manage and get more productivity out of the aircraft. And so we very much see that there will be consolidation. We believe we need to be in the vanguard. We believe in terms of that successful MROs in the future, in terms of we'll have global presence and scale. To be honest, to make the investments that you require today, to be a proper provider, a tier 1 provider for maintenance on the 787, you just need to have that global presence and scale to be able to have the number of aircraft captured to manage to make the economics work. We need to be a strategic partner with the leading OEMs and with our airline partners, and we need to provide more than the traditional MRO services. Going forward, we believe that a successful MRO provider of the future will be part of a network of companies that provide a suite of aero solutions for the airline industry. So we see in terms of not just in terms of global reach, but we see a broader suite of services that we bring to the customer. Thank you.
Excellent. Thanks for that, James. It's obviously a very wide range of topics that we've covered in this session. So I'd just like to address some of them in questions and answers with the panel. I think one of the first ones I'd like to look at is airline alliances. Now, if you go back to the 1990s, the big alliances were really seen as a sort of a key to how we could have the best of both worlds. So we could keep national flag carrier airlines, but at the same time create global networks through alliances. And I think there's some doubt as to how successful they've been. And I think on the panel here we've perhaps got a variety of business models, if you like, when it comes to alliances. Ethiopian, of course, a Star Alliance member. Etihad, Emirates, not really going down the road of the alliances. Then we've got the low-cost model as well, which again hasn't really doesn't really fit with the alliance global alliance model. So I'd just like to ask the panel their views on alliances. Are they the answer, or has it got to be something broader? Has it got to be a more aggressive, bold consolidation that we're going to see in order to make the airline industry more competitive? Perhaps, Tewolde, you could talk about your experience with Star Alliance and how that fits into your strategy.
We are fairly new in the Star Alliance, about 4 months now, but I think whether it is alliance or consolidation or acquisition and mergers, the key point here is efficiency. Efficiency on the supply side, and also matching supply and demand on the demand side, on the revenue side. So, of course, the alliance is giving us efficiency on the supply side, and we will see also some kind of benefits on the demand side, but it is not easy also within the alliance that there is competition and cooperation simultaneously. There is also kind of an alliance within the alliance, so it's not easy, but definitely in terms of working together and solving some of the problems that we have been discussing here, it helps. But as I said, whether it is consolidation or acquisition, mergers, or alliance, if it somehow manages the demand side and increases the load factor and yield by reducing capacity, I mean taking out the excess capacity in the industry, it's helpful. But even within an alliance or consolidated carriers, if they grow or if they plan to grow as much as they would grow separately, then again we'll have the same problem of excess capacity. And on the supply side that I mentioned before, in order to address some of the monopolistic and duopolistic situation on suppliers, maybe carriers in an alliance, if they can really bring their act together, can consolidate their purchasing power by joint purchasing or joint use of resources. So definitely it's helpful, but it also depends on the specific carrier strategy and objectives.
Thank you very much. Kevin, from Etihad's point of view, you're in charge of strategy and planning. That strategy has not included a formal membership of an alliance, but you have partnerships with other airlines, and of course you have, importantly, as you said, gone down the road of equity stakes in Air Berlin and Air Seychelles. How does Etihad view the alliances?
Separation between partnerships and alliances. In some ways they do the same thing. It's just a degree as to how you achieve your objectives. I mean, the reality is that no individual airline can serve all the needs of the customers, either because it's not economic for us to do so, or, as we're talking about in this panel, because there are barriers to our entry into those markets. And so partnerships, alliances, are really an effective way to, as I said in my opening remarks, provide our customers with broader reach and more choices, and drive more revenue to our businesses so that we can grow them. At Etihad, it's 18% of our revenues are driven by the partnerships that we have. I mean, it's a significant part of our business. This business is about, again, providing customers what they're looking for. And what customers are looking for are great service. They're looking for value for their money. and they're looking for somebody that can provide them access to all the places that they want to go. This is a network business. This is a business of scale. And being able to provide your customers the products that they desire and provide them the access to the markets that they want to get to in a cost-effective way is really what it's all about in the marketplace. The carrier that can do that better than the competitor is going to be the one that wins in the marketplace.
Thank you. Thierry, from Emirates' point of view, I mean, Emirates famously markets itself as a global connector. You can fly anyone anywhere in the world virtually to and from Dubai. Do alliances and partnerships play any part in the Emirates business model?
By the way, one year ago I was working for an airline being part of an alliance. That's why I can compare really both models. I do not think that on the long term alliances are, even if you respect at Emirates these strategies, are the right customer-centric strategy. A customer buys a brand and a product. If he wants to buy an Emirates flight, EK, he wants also to fly EK. He appreciates to have an Emirates lounge, an Emirates chauffeur drive service, so it's an homogeneous product. The alliances were made in the 90s just because of shortage of some capital and issues to make a global offer to the customer. Okay, good. But in the meantime, the complexity and the size makes them very heterogeneous. And these alliances, having sold seamless travel, are now about to sell or to offer seamless travel. Because if you buy an airline with another code and the luggage is not following, it's very difficult for the customer. That's why now, having experienced the two worlds, I am convinced that a clarity for the customer, especially with the technology, is key. And the future belongs to the brands being global, having access to the markets, and offering a customer value, a customer quality, and very leasable by the customer. Absolutely clearly. The alliance brings, by the way, a second danger, because now, especially under financial pressure, the alliances are looking between big partners how they can make mega joint venture, let's say between Europe and North Atlantic or between Europe and Japan. They look for antitrust immunity they get, and because of that they constrain the market and create some monopoles, or try to create some monopoly and increase the prices. That's not in the interest of the customer. It can reduce the choice and have an impact. That's why we position Emirates as a global alternative, quality alternative to that. And it's not only our strategy, but it's also the interest of the customer. I think if you work too long in an alliance, you think more and more about the shareholder. What can I do to increase my load factor, to increase my yield? It's good. But I think if you begin with a customer obsession, like an airline of Emirates, but some other airlines, Mr. Al-Bakr spoke also about this customer orientation this morning. You are successful through the customer choice, and it makes the shareholder happy. Beginning with the shareholder thinking may not systematically make your customer happy, and if your customer is not buying back your product, you can be in trouble. That's why I think the future will be in leasability for the customer and choice for the customer, and that's what global airlines can offer, but for that they need the access to the traffic rights. Emirates need an access to the third biggest city in Europe, Berlin. We can live without that. Germany will live without that, but it's a missed opportunity for the Berlin tourism industry or for the Berlin customer. That's my view. Thank you.
Thank you. In the world of low-cost airlines, maybe Ghaith, it's alliances haven't figured. It's a short-haul, medium-haul business model. But is there any role for partnerships and alliances as you begin to grow brands like flydubai?
Well, let me just give my own comments on globalization, on alliance, because I think we have to understand that first before I can give you my opinion about low cost. I think alliance, if you want to understand it from a man of the street point of view, is that, and the comparison between alliance and no alliance, is that if you can do it yourself, okay, you don't need alliance. And I think the difference between us and the rest of the world, there are certain parts of the world like America and Europe, the potential for growth is limited because of slots, because of finance. So they went to alliance to grow their businesses. So in this part of the world, if you can grow yourself and be a global airline like Emirates, Qatar Airways, and Etihad, why do you need to do it with somebody else? Then the customer choice, the customer gets one brand. So in my opinion, that for this part of the world, or the right solution is that if you can grow yourself, you don't need alliances, number one. And I think since we are talking about a very sensitive issue, which is the issue of regulations, sometimes an alliance influences some of the policies. And I don't want to talk out of reference here, but since I am in the airline industry, I can say so. You look at the most fought after issue in this part of the world with another country is the UAE versus Canada. And UAE versus Canada, the UAE could not get more capacity to fly people direct from Canada to here and beyond, is because primarily because there are certain interests of certain airline alliances to stop that happening. So alliances could also be against the customer needs. Why would a customer needs to fly to Europe to go to India? Because that is the interest of the alliance. So I think there is a very interesting link between alliances and regulatory environment that I wanted to highlight. As far as low cost is concerned, I think alliances will even be more difficult, because in the low cost airline, we try to have a very simple system. So you would like to take away a lot of complexity from the process, low cost. And I think to say that there will be alliances on a low cost frontier, I personally don't see that happening.
Okay.
Thank you.
Neil, perhaps from the India, you know, we've had a sort of frenetic growth of the airline industry in India. More recently, perhaps some of the airlines in trouble, enormous infrastructure challenges in the country, as you alluded to. As a low-cost carrier, what potential do you see for alliances and consolidation in the Indian market and perhaps beyond?
I think there's two different issues there. One is obviously the simple mathematical fact is -1 plus -1 doesn't give you a positive number. So if you're trying to use an alliance or a tie-up to fix an underlying problem within the individual carriers, that's never going to work. And you've certainly seen multiple examples of that over time. If you're trying to use the alliances to artificially reduce capacity, that's not going to work either. But from an Indian perspective, India has never really become an aviation hub because of the regulatory issues that actually exist there. But certainly informal tie-ups for a low-cost carrier are certainly possible. One thing that does need to work, or certainly does need to be adapted for this part of the world, is we can look at other parts of the world and say, well, the model needs to be replicated the same way it is in the US or in Europe. But we don't live in the US or Europe. So we need to adapt this market. And a lot of the population growth that is happening in Asia is actually happening in much smaller cities. Now, simple tie-ups as to how to get these people efficiently from there to points in the US, North America, and even South America is actually something that we should work on. But it's something that I think it won't be an alliance in the old-fashioned term, but something that's more of an informal type tie-up, which will help to facilitate getting a lot of these customers from large population bases efficiently into some of the existing big hubs and to get them out to where they want to go. So maybe they'll end up with a 2 or 3 point stop before they get to their final destination. They don't really have an alternative now. And we really need to look at doing that, but without introducing a huge amount of complexity or cost. So no, the old-fashioned alliance, I think, is pretty much dead. I think it only works now to protect the existing members and to exclude certain others. But we should certainly look at how we can get efficiency out of the existing models and networks that exist today.
Okay, thank you. James, from the MRO side of things, you know, as we talked about earlier, we've seen a huge change in the MRO model from, you know, going back to perhaps 10 years where virtually every airline tried to be a one-stop shop, all things to all men, internal MRO department. We've seen a lot of change in that model. Can you see, how do you see that progressing over the next 5 or 10 years in terms of consolidation, in terms of specializing into global centers of excellence, or at least regional centers of excellence?
I think, as you said, in terms of, again, we have to remember the evolution of our business. And you know, if we go back 20, 30 years in terms of, you needed really specialized engineers, etc., to troubleshoot the aircraft. Aircraft weren't as reliable in terms of, and so at that point, you absolutely needed, as an airline, to create in terms of the engineering excellence. World has moved forward in terms of significantly. Reliability of product, the complexity of the products in terms of very different today. Technology, IT, very different today. How you troubleshoot an aircraft, you don't have to go to paper manuals in terms of you're into electronic manuals, etc. So I think, as we talked about, going forward, you know, to make the investments, to be able to be a full-service MRO provider to our customers, and to be able to service the 787 and airlines aircraft like this, then you need to make significant capital investments. You need to have significant access to information, develop new repairs in terms of, you're not going to see the aircraft as much in terms of, so you're going to have to manage more aircraft to get the same volume of business. And so I think we see the trend already started in terms of, you've seen, I'm sure, recently in Europe, some airlines that were, let's say, smaller MRO players consolidating in terms of their services, in fact, through our network. And I think we continue to see that. And certainly I believe over the next decade to 15 years, you start to see somewhere between 5 and 8 global players with deep capability, and as we talked about before, not just capability with respect to MRO services, but a deeper capability to provide more solutions, asset management, financing, etc., to the airlines. I think that's the way forward for our business.
Okay, thank you for that. We've got a short period of time left. So what I'm going to do is ask, the topic of the session today is overcoming regulatory constraints to become global aviation businesses. I'm going to ask each of the panel, what is in their world or their business, what is the one regulatory constraint that they would like to see removed to make their life a lot easier? I mean, Tewolde, maybe I could start with you. What is the biggest constraint to your business, the biggest regulatory constraint that would make your life a lot easier were it removed?
I think from our perspective, it is the way governments look at the aviation sector, and particularly the carriers. In some of the places where we fly, aviation is taxed much more than alcohol. And this doesn't make sense, because aviation is a public service, transport service sector. It needs to be encouraged, and it should be taxed fairly. But the tax regime is very strict on aviation, whether in our continent in Africa, or in Europe, or in the other regions. It is heavily taxed. So this tax is manifested in various areas, like fuel is heavily taxed in Africa, and ticket taxes. So it is making the already fragile and less profitable, loss-making industry more problematic for the airlines, and it's also making the affordability of air transport for the customer more expensive, and also hidden in the charges, airport charges, there are taxes again, so it's heavily taxed. I think for us, as you say, if we have to choose the most difficult or in a scale, the most challenging area, it's tax.
Tax. Okay, interesting. Just in a few sentences now, because as our monitors are telling us, we've got 5 minutes left and have to wrap up. But you have the switch to the magic trapdoor, Kevin, which is the regulation or the regulatory hurdle that you would get rid of.
It's pretty hard to choose just one. But if I had to choose one, it would probably be access to markets. You know, I think the UAE is a shining example of, you know, the wisdom associated with an open skies, open market, and what can be achieved, not just for the aviation participants, but for the cities and the countries, you know, that we serve. You know, I think that that's probably the one key barrier that I'd like to see removed.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. James, you talked about the MRO world existing in a slightly different, not quite as regulated and constrained as the world that the airlines have to deal with, but what in your side of the business would make life easier?
A key part of our business is obviously getting more utilization of assets, and therefore being able to move assets in and out of countries, in and out of jurisdictions quickly and easily. So basically having a different set of customs in terms of regulations that we have to abide by, and the removal of protectionist taxes that we see in some jurisdiction, that would be very helpful to the globalization.
Thank you. Neil, you talked obviously about this quite passionately in your presentation. Where do you start, I suppose, in India? But give us one.
I think it would be quite hard to choose just one, but I think the one that I think is the most realistic to ask for is some form of certainty. So even if the regulatory constraint's there, just give us some certainty as to what the process is and how long it will take to get through it. Because we can actually plan on that basis. We buy aeroplanes and we employ people on a long-term basis. Unless we have some sort of certainty, that's probably the biggest constraint at the moment, or the lack of certainty, that actually has the biggest impact for us.
Okay, thank you. Thierry, what would make your life easier?
My wish would be like that on a worldwide basis, like in the UAE or in the region here, the aviation industry became a strategic one. I think the success here of some airlines is based on we are in a strategic industry, and because of that, you have a truly open sky policy and a real invest in the infrastructure. It's not possible to make the aviation strategic, obviously, worldwide. Therefore, per default, my wish would be to have more access to the market, and it would help all the airline and also the shareholder of the airlines, because if I look as a quite new kids on the block at Emirates, and it's not an exception, but it's somehow also an exception, this company has been extremely successful in the last 26 years, always delivered what it had to deliver. Service, but also return to the shareholder, to the customer. It has to do with a strategic vision, with a strategy, with the people in charge, but it has also to do with the product, the network, but with a condition, fully open sky and access to the market. That's why my wish would be that, access to the market, if the big wish, aviation would become strategic industry worldwide, is not realized.
Okay. Thank you. Excellent. Ghaith, if you ran the whole industry rather than just flydubai, what would be your first on your list to change?
Access. Thank you.
Very short answer, but excellent. Okay, so we've got a variety of answers there, from access to taxation to a clear vision from governments about where their vision for aviation. So I think we've come to the end of the session now, ladies and gentlemen. Please join me in thanking our distinguished panel for taking the time to talk to us this morning. Thank you very much.